Hello my dear friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I am Joy and today in this lecture we will discuss about the implications of low food inflation on the economy. First of all, let us understand what is the current affair. The food inflation, when it becomes low and over a longer period of time, it will have negative impacts on the economy and political scenario. So this has made the lower food inflation an important current affair, and we will discuss this issue in detail in this lecture. But before moving on to the topic in detail, let me explain some basic concepts. The first one being food inflation. So what is meant by a food inflation? Inflation generally means a persistent rise in the prices of commodities in the market. So whenever the commodities in the market experience a long-term rise in the prices, it is termed as inflation. And when this inflation is due to an increase in the prices of food commodities, it is termed as food inflation. So we can say that food inflation is the persistent rise in the prices of food commodities in the market. So this is food inflation. And inflation negatively impacts the consumers because the consumers will have to face a rise in the price, and the vulnerable category like low income households, daily wage workers, etc., they are all highly impacted due to inflation. But when there is a extended or long period food inflation, it negatively impacts the other side, that is the producers. So here the producers in food inflation or food commodities are the farmers or the agriculturists. So what happens? Their income will be impacted. So this is the general understanding that you should have about food inflation and its impact. Now we will go on to the details of this. Let us first analyze the food prices in the previous few years. Now taking 2012 to 14 period, if we examine the 27-month period from March 2012 to May 2014, we will see that the year-on-year inflation in food was more than that of the overall consumer price index. So food inflation was higher than CPI or the consumer price index. So what is consumer price index? Consumer price index measures the inflation for the basket of consumer goods and services. So during 2012 to 14 period, we will see food inflation was higher than CPI or consumer price index. Now coming to 2014-16 period, the trend continued. That means food inflation was higher than the CPI. The price of food commodities in the market increased at a higher rate than the price of other consumer commodities increased. In 2012 to 14 period, 25 out of 27 months taken into consideration, the food inflation was higher. And in 2014-16 period, out of 27 months, in 20 months, the food inflation was higher than that of the consumer price index inflation. But now coming to 2016-18 period, the September 2016 to November 2018 period, the consumer food inflation in India was much below than the general inflation. So that means food inflation less than CPI or general inflation. And out of this 27 months, in 5 months we will see that the annual increase in the official consumer food price index has been negative. So what does it mean? In simple terms, we can say that the consumers, they pay less for vegetables, pulses, sugar, or other food commodities. So it was beneficial for the consumers. The prices of food commodities were less. And when the rate of inflation is lesser for a longer period of time, we term it as deflation. So this type of lower inflation or deflation in the food sector or food inflation has rarely happened in the economic history of India. Now, what are the twin implications of this extended low food inflation? We specifically mention it as extended because this has persisted over a longer period of time. That is why it is extended lower food inflation. So it has two implications. One is in the economic front and the second one is on the political front. So first we will analyze the economic impact of this lower food inflation. In the economic front, what happened? The general rate of inflation came down. So there are two main reasons for this. One reason is that the prices of oil has come down And second one is that the lower food inflation or the prices of food commodities also came down. So both these factors has led to an overachievement in meeting the inflation target. An inflation target is set by the government in consultation with the RBI. This is very, very important, especially for objective type questions like UPSC preliminary examination. There can be a question on who sets the inflation target. It is not by RBI, it is done by the government in consultation with the RBI. And India has an inflation target. So India tries to keep the inflation rates within that particular target. And inflation targeting was recommended by Urjit Patel Committee on Inflation in the year 2013. Now, what is the economic impact? When the inflation comes down, generally the Monetary Policy Committee, who is responsible for setting the interest rates or the benchmark interest rates in the economy, will bring down the interest rates. So this general rate of inflation is caused due to many factors, out of which food inflation is a major factor that will influence the rate of general inflation. So when the food inflation is much lower, it will have a significant impact on the general rate of inflation. So the general rate of inflation will come down, and this will influence the Monetary Policy Committee in order to bring down the interest rates. But in case of India, we have not seen a decrease in the interest rates by the Monetary Policy Committee, but it is expected that in the next Monetary Policy Committee review meeting, the interest rates can be brought down on account of lower rates of food inflation. So what happens when the benchmark interest rates are reduced? It means that the credit is available at cheaper rates. So it will enhance the money supply in the economy. There will be more money supply, means more infrastructural developments, more investment, more production, more supply. And second one is the political impact. What is the political impact? The political impact is the agrarian crisis or the agrarian unrest. Now, the beneficiaries due to lower food inflation is the consumers, and it will impact the general rate of inflation as well, and it will have an impact on the monetary policy of the country in a way that the Monetary Policy Committee will decide to reduce the interest rates. So this is the economic impact, and coming to the political impact is the unrest among the farmers. Recent days we have seen many protests by the farmers that they are not paid remunerative prices. They do not have a stable income. So this is the political impact. When food is available at cheaper rates, it is beneficial for the consumers. But for the farmers, it is a negative implication. They are paid less for their produce. They do not have decent remuneration. The produce prices for the farmers are very low. And a majority of the rural economy is dependent on agriculture and allied activities. So this will have a negative impact on the farmers. So their income becomes unstable. They will be short of finance for the next cropping season. So this can lead to a unrest among the farmers and agricultural distress. So this is the twin implications of a lower rate of food inflation. Now the role of government is to balance both these implications. The consumers must be ensured availability of food commodities at an affordable rate. But at the same time, for the producers or for the farmers, they should be ensured income stability, decent remuneration for their produce. So this is the challenge with the government. Both these conflicting implications needs to be balanced carefully by the government. The policies or the guidelines will have to be framed by the government and its agencies. Now let us understand what are the reasons for such lower levels of food inflation in the economy. The first reason is the supply side glut. It means that the supply of food commodities in the market is higher than the demand. And in microeconomics, we have learned the law of supply. When the supply increases over the demand, the price will come down. This is because there is an excess of commodities over the demand. And this increase in supply is caused due to bumper domestic harvest as well as low global prices. So this has led to an increase in the supply of agricultural commodities or food grains. So this has led to a lowering of prices in the market, and this can be managed by the government by adopting proper procurement policies. And at the same time, the impact on the farmers will be magnified if the government undertakes restrictive policies. For example, export restriction. When government imposes export restriction on certain commodities, what happens? The farmers have no choice but to sell these commodities in the local market or in the domestic market itself. So this will have an impact in the farmer's income. And another factor here is the imports. For example, the imports of pulses. India has imported around 6.61 million tons of pulses in 2016-17. But in the same period, 2016-17, India has seen a bumper harvest in the pulses. So what happens? Along with domestic production, when there is availability of imported pulses, together the supply will multiply. So there will be an excess supply over the demand, and this will lead to lowering of prices. So this imports also hampers the farmers at many a times. And there are also demand side concerns. When the demand for certain food commodities are lesser, the price will also fall. Again, next is the liquidity concern. So what is meant by liquidity concern? Liquidity is basically the availability of liquid cash. So the commodity trading in food commodities in India is basically cash based. You go to a mandi, you purchase some vegetables or fruits, you pay in the form of cash. So factors like demonetization, the GST, daily limits of cash transactions, etc. have impacted the demand for food commodities. So a lesser cash circulation in the system also impacts the prices of food commodities. You can find the PDF of this lecture on my Facebook page, and for any queries regarding your UPSC preparations, you can get in touch with me on my Facebook page, or you can email me at joycey.studyiq@gmail.com. Thank you. I wish you all a very good day.